And good morning, everybody. My name is Nicholas Whitaker. I'm the Media Outreach Manager on the News Lab at Google. Thank you for joining us today. It is 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 7 a.m. Pacific. I know it's really early for a lot of people, but it's a little bit late for a lot of people that joined yesterday and were having technical difficulties and weren't able to actually see the Hangout. So we're doing it over again. We've got Craig here with us today. He's going to be presenting for, what, about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, give or take. And then we'll have a lot of time for Q&A. I know we've got a lot of questions from folks who joined us yesterday, as well as some more comments and questions that we got in through today. But I also just wanted to give everyone a heads up that we have one more Hangout on air going on next Friday. It's part 7 of 7. Format innovation with guest Rudy Galfi. So definitely, if you have additional questions, make sure you keep bringing those in to us. You can add them into the Q&A app on this actual Hangout right now, or in the comment section on the Google Plus page, or on our Twitter account at Google News Lab. I also wanted to let folks know that within the next several weeks, we're going to be doing international language or other languages as well. So if English is not your first language, you can expect a whole host of additional Hangouts for the next 7 weeks coming up in multiple languages. So feel free to send us your questions then as well. I think that's about it for housekeeping. Stacy Chan, would you like to introduce our guests today, and we'll get started?
Yes, thanks, Nick. My name is Stacy Chan. I'm the Media Partnerships Manager over on the Google Search side, and very excited to continue to be working on the AMP project, and really, really thrilled to introduce Craig DiNatali. He's the Director of Partnerships and the man with a plan for ads in AMP. So he's going to kick it off with a presentation, but as Nick said, he's leaving plenty of time for questions, so make sure to leave that in the comment section or directly live in the stream. And we're also going to have one of our tech leads, Vamsi Jassi, who's joining shortly. He is also having a few technical issues, seems to be a theme, but he'll be here soon. So Craig, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy, and thanks everybody for dialing back in after some of the technical challenges, which I also experienced yesterday, so you weren't alone. But thanks everybody for taking the time there. As Stacy mentioned, I'm going to walk through a very brief presentation because I know there are a lot of questions around advertising in AMP. But first, I'll give you kind of, to Stacy's point, my introduction is, so I'm the Director of Partnerships, and what a lot of my role is with AMP is focused around a lot of the industry partnerships. So it has to do with a lot of the partnerships we're doing with third-party partners and publishers, but also third-party technology companies, and also driving quite a bit of the advertising strategy within AMP. And so there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot that we've accomplished already. But again, it's very early on here. So thanks everybody for joining, and Vamsi's going to join as well to address any technical questions or issues. I think first, I just kind of want to level set on some of the things and some of the reasons why that AMP is important. And it has to mostly do with what publishers are facing today. And this is a global challenge, not just isolated to specific areas. There's changing ways that publishers need to distribute their content, and there's evolving ecosystems, both closed and as AMP is open, that publishers need to comply with and need to get on board with to make sure that they can continue to grow audience and so on and so forth. We think it's very healthy to have an open ecosystem, and we'll sort of touch on a little bit of that as well. There's poor consumer perceptions for mobile web experiences. I mean, I can't see you all, but I can imagine if I asked you to raise your hand who loves to click on an article that takes 18 to 22 seconds to load before you get frustrated, most of you would raise your hands that that's a frustrating experience. And so, we're aware of that. I know many publishers are aware of that as well, and have been looking for tools to try to enhance and improve that experience. Monetization is hard. I think, just as publishers started to figure out monetization for desktop, it finally became the year of mobile, and that's become a challenge as well for publishers to drive and be successful there. And similar to point one, technology updates are outpacing development cycles, and what it really means there is that every couple of months there's a new method and a new way that somebody's required to publish content or implement their advertising, and it's become really, really complicated. And that innovation has in some cases outpaced what the development cycles of publishers are. And ad blockers are a challenge for the industry. It's a challenge for the advertising industry globally. And while AMP is not a something that's designed to explicitly have direct impact on ad blockers, it does have to do with user experience, and we think user experience is a very big reason why ad blockers have become so prominent and popular. So just to level set a little bit on kind of some of the challenges, some of the newer challenges that publishers are faced with. So what about the ads? And I think for those who have read our blog posts about ads, we really, through discussions with publishers and discussions with third-party partners, we came up with some core principles. And I think these are really guiding principles for us to make sure that as we're working with partners, but also other third parties, that we sort of align around these. So faster is better. I think nobody really argues with the fact that faster loading content and faster loading advertising is a better experience for the consumers and ultimately a better experience for publishers and advertisers. Beauty matters, beautiful matters. So creative has in some cases, not all, but in some cases, creative has taken a back seat to volume and tonnage of ad inventory, and we think that there's an opportunity here, both with AMP but also with other platforms, to bring back that really beautiful experience for creative on that level, and again specifically to mobile devices. Be safe, be secure. I think everybody reads weekly an update about the fraud that exists on the internet, and not just on desktop but on mobile as well. And I think everybody needs to align around creating safer and more secure environments for consumers, but also for advertisers and for publishers' data. And better together. Having been at Google about 8 years now, this is the most collaborative effort and largest scale outreach that I've seen us do, specifically as it pertains to advertising as well. It's really been an open conversation with a lot of partners in the market that we had traditionally competed with. But I think it's important here, given its openness, that we're engaging with these partners and we're working with them to create better experiences for their publishers and again, drive some revenue, which I think is important in the function of, you need to fund the creation of good content as well. So these are the core principles that we've laid out, and you'll see these will be consistent in a lot of what we say and see, and a lot of what you'll see from the AMP project, going forward post-launch. So I think it's important to also realize that we're just getting started. AMP had a developer preview, I believe it was about 9 months ago, and so we're moving quickly towards this February launch. And for February launch, we'll have core functionality. We'll have native formats for advertising, which I think is a really important aspect of creating value within this mobile web ecosystem outside of just traditional advertising. We'll have and allow some rich media formats, and programmatic advertising is something that we know is really big and important to a lot of publishers and a lot of advertisers. And so we wanted to make sure that also that functioned as smoothly as possible. I think what you'll see from us going forward is a few different things. One is you'll see more platforms and more third-party partners not only get on board and integrate in certain ways with AMP, but also innovate on top of AMP. I think we'll see some new ad units that will come out of the innovation and the work that's being done, not only within Google as we're thinking about it for our own sort of technology products, but also from many third parties. We've had a number of them already start to think about how they can create smaller working groups to come up with new innovative formats and new ways to drive value for publishers and marketers. And I think we'll see some marketer innovation. There's some parallels to the benefit of speed that also exists for advertisers. And we're obviously looking at how that can help the overall advertising ecosystem, and we'll continue to bring publishers on board. Again, it's an open source project, so it's it's open to anybody, and we've already had publishers self-serve and go and third parties, frankly, self-serve and go live and create functionality for AMP. And then Q4 and beyond, there's a lot to be done there, and there's a lot of, again, innovation there. I think one of the things we're trying to solve for is we're really not taking a short-sighted look at this and saying, hey, we want to band-aid a mobile problem for the next 9 months. We're taking a longer view, and many of the publishers, and I think you'll hear some of this as they start to launch too, is they're taking a longer view of AMP, and they want to make sure that they're also thinking through the best ways to implement and be set up for success in the longer term. Again, a lot of bullet points here, but you'll understand why in a minute. So what this is designed to show you is a little bit about what is going to be available from V1, day one of launch. Many publishers are already sort of implemented this and are working with it, but I think that it's just important to list these out. So integrations with existing trafficking workflows, I think this is really important for publishers. A lot of what they shared with us was, we don't want to have to create all new systems and all new packages and all new products to be able to do this. We want to be able to make sure that it works with our existing workflows. And so, we were able to, take a lot of that feedback and make sure that it was an easier, simplified approach, and that there wouldn't be a lot of heavy lifting on that side. There's going to be support for the most common ad formats, so standard banner ads, HTML5 ads, native ads, and ads that resize on user interaction. And I think that's an important one as well. Native advertising has become a very prominent piece of the mobile advertising ecosystem. And so we think it's important to create that functionality, not only work with some of the third parties that are providing these platforms for publishers, but also some publishers who are creating their own custom native solutions and implementations. You will see those publishers also have the ability to implement and integrate with you. The DFP, which is a product that Google owns and operates, is sort of treated in this project as a third party. But given that it does have a lot of partners and it's asked about quite a bit, all of the core functionality that publishers, I think loving is an overstatement, but the core functionalities that publishers use most frequently, frequency capping, targeting, non-guaranteed roadblocks, competitive separations, those are all going to be functional and all are currently functional within DFP. The next important one, which was a top publisher ask and is a top advertiser ask, if you were to poll them, is viewability and measurement support. And so we do have ActiveView working and supported, and we also have Moat working and supported, and we are actually working and speaking with all of the other not only viewability but measurement and verification companies about making sure that they're also available to provide support within AMP. This was a very important thing, just given that a lot of the measurability challenges within mobile have been focused around you can only measure clicks and you can only measure viewability, so we wanted to make sure that those third-party companies that measure are involved. We're working very hard on optimizing the loading of ads. I think a lot has been written around how content loads really fast, but then you're waiting on the ads. And I think what you'll see is that DFP specifically, but also other third parties that we've worked with, are really looking very closely at how do we optimize the delivery of advertising to speed that process up. Some of that is on the creative side. Some of that is simply on just how complicated in some instances the process is for delivering back an advertising unit. But I think the industry is been very receptive to this. It's not only a Google DFP project and problem, if you will, but certainly we're also looking at that. And then we focused a lot, and where I've spent a lot of time is integration with third-party providers. So we're working with various demand sources. So the SSPs that are in the market, Rubicon, others, Criteo, Openness, we're speaking with all of them. The exchanges, we're speaking with AppNexus and others. And we really want to make sure, and we know it's important, and they're important partners to publishers. And since this is an open ecosystem, we want to make sure that they have what they need to be able to integrate as well. We've also, again, on this side, had many third parties self-serve and go into AMP and into GitHub, into the open environment, and create plugins and create solutions and try to innovate on top of AMP, which I think is healthy and the right thing to do. Sponsored content providers were very important. So Taboola, Outbrain are two that were referenced quite a bit by a number of the publishers that were ready for initial launch, and they're both, integrated into which is really important and I think a nice step just from a pure monetization standpoint. Video players, we know that video is important and growing, so we've had video players integrate. Excuse me. And data management platforms. A lot of partners have stated that both using third-party and first-party data to try to enhance direct sales and create unique value is important. And so we've been working with the data management platforms on integrations as well. And so again, I know this is in list format, which isn't the most elegant way to lay it out, but we thought it was important just to highlight and be a little bit more specific on what will be available and what we'll have for the launch. I think the important thing there, and I mentioned this earlier, was around the openness of AMP, and how we're trying to approach it to be truly open and engage with many of the third-party companies, but also allowing the publishers to do as much of what they do today that is in line with the goals of what AMP project, and frankly what other projects similar to AMP are trying to do, which is to speed up and create a better user experience for content consumption. So this is just a quick view about what is being allowed, and I think it's important, again, just to highlight the openness of AMP and how important it is for us to remain that way. And to work with the third-party ecosystem on what we're doing here, because we know it's important to publishers and obviously longer-term advertisers, but also to ensure that third-party analytics providers, which are critical for publishers, work really well. And there was an analytics analytics hangout previously, which I know touched on a lot of that. So I'm not going to walk through this in detail, but again, it's just goes to the openness. We're currently engaged pretty heavily with I would say probably closer to 35 to 40 of ad tech companies. This is something for those who love their logo slides. This is just something that shows who has been the most engaged and created a lot of the early solutions and plugins within AMP. Excuse me. So we are excited about the activity here and expecting excuse me, more and more innovation to come out not only of this group but out of the additional people that come in and help on AMP. So again, third-party update. I mentioned this is where I'm spending a lot of my time. This is mostly as it relates to how we're doing towards and against launch in terms of our engagement with them. We're having regular interactions with them, both on the on the business side, just discussing with them the longer-term goals of AMP and the longer-term goals of their organizations, but also on the technical side to make sure that we can, that we can meet the needs based on how they want to interact and work within the AMP environment. So we're already starting to think about what's next, and I mentioned earlier on one of the slides about how early on we are in the process, and so I would say we're right at the starting line of where this can go, and we thought it was important again to walk through some of the initial functionality that will exist on V1 of AMP, but we think that there's a lot more breadth that can and sort of innovation that can come on top of it. Some of that is newer, better, and more premium ad formats that deliver better user experiences. We know viewability is important, and we know adhesion units are important to the viewability of that. And so we're looking at ways to innovate on those types of advertising units to make sure that we can create the right experience with the right implementations for them. To make sure that they're not disruptive to the user experience, but they're adding and generating good value for both publishers and advertisers. Pre-roll videos. There's a lot of talk right now in the industry about pre-roll video and its place in not only on the web but also within mobile devices. So we think that there's innovation that can have there as well. I mean, we've done some of this at the Google side with YouTube with the skippable ad formats, and so that's an innovation that is with YouTube, and we know other platforms have their own innovation. But we think that for the AMP project and for implementations that are truly different and optimizing for a different experience, that pre-roll could have some innovation that can bring to that. And we mentioned flying carpets, where it's been a largely brand experience that has been appealing to a lot of brands within the mobile environments, which is being able to scroll through different types of ads that kind of lay in the back of the content. And so we're looking at a lot of these different things, and we're open to all of them. I would say we're open to discussing with other third parties as well what their innovation is, and we're also open to say, hey, we know that it's hard for publishers and creative companies to create different advertising implementations across many different platforms, and so we'd love to be able to work together to align around how we can create better scale to that. One innovation that's being considered is AMP documents as ads. A lot of marketers say that every millisecond increase in landing page time for my landing page and my website will also improve the conversion and improve the engagement that I'll get within my own brand. So we're not only looking and thinking about how can it be applied to advertiser and just website landing pages, but also can you actually use AMPs as a ad unit to deliver the ad instantly alongside the way that the content loads instantly as well. We're going to continue to integrate ad servers, networks, and agencies. And so we prioritize based on a lot of feedback, and again, it's open source, so many have helped themselves, but we're going to continue to do that work, and we think it's important work for the openness of AMP. Alignment with better ads standards. We know that there's a lot of this, a lot of buzz around this in the ad industry as well. And so what we're trying to do is to also make sure that we're aligning with the best standards for advertisers and user experience on the web, and on the mobile web. And there will be eventual integrations that happen with Google and other third-party buy-side and sell-side products. This kind of is similar to integration with more ad servers, but we think that this is an important innovation that can happen. I mean, innovation isn't just let's create the next big ad unit. Innovation is also creating better technology to deliver the advertising to the consumer on the publisher's site. So support and partnership is critical. I've touched on this a few different times throughout this presentation, and me myself, and for any third parties that are dialed into the call, it's a nice thank you, because you guys have been really really collaborative and really good to work with on this project, and also taking a long-term view to say, these are not short-term little things that we're trying to accomplish. We're truly trying to make sure that there's a viable mobile web for the future, and advertising is an important part of that, and we all need to work together to make that happen. And we're, again, working with them on new ads innovations. It's not just going to be what Google comes up with for their ad technology groups. There's many innovations. There's companies like YieldMo, and there's companies, other companies that are doing really great things in advertising that have already started to look at AMP and say, this is a great experience. The ask of many of the publishers is to make AMP content available, and excuse me, to make as much of it as available as possible. The incremental approach makes sense, but we also want to make sure that people can iterate on top of what any initial launch that they make is, and we can all learn along with you. And again, one of the other elements to this is everybody wants to know what is the impact on monetization, and I think close collaboration with both Google, where Google is your monetization partner, but also with others, where others are your monetization partners, is critical. It would, if I'm a publisher and I'm in a publisher's shoes right now, I am making sure that I am regularly in contact, where AMP is a priority for me and my product team, that I'm regularly in contact with the monetization partners that we have to make sure that we're going to have the support and have the conversations around optimizing revenue in real time, because we obviously know that that's an important element of ensuring that you can still write and generate the greatest content on the web and keep your businesses healthy. So again, I kept the presentation intentionally short because Stacy said that there were a lot of questions, and if questions are related to the technical challenges yesterday, I don't know the answers to those. But here's a number of links, and what we'll make sure we do is send out a lot of different links. The teams have spent a lot of time creating help documents, advertising guides, and best practices, and we're going to be distributing those more and more to make sure that publishers, but also third-party ad technology companies that are interested in getting involved in AMP kind of know where to go and know how to navigate GitHub and navigate the websites and that we have for AMP project. So that's the extent of the presentation. Stacy, I don't know if we wanted to jump into some of the questions, and I think Vamsi joined.
Great. So Vamsi's in the room with you right now, Craig?
Vamsi is in the room with me, yes.
Great. And all the links, actually, thanks to Vamsi's proactiveness, are available on the Google Plus event. So while you're asking your questions, you can also poke around to the exact links that Craig was mentioning at the end of his presentation if you want to start deep diving into more info.
All right. So Craig, let's take a few questions here. I'm gonna start off kind of more broad, and then there's some pretty specific questions that we can dig into in a little bit. We got one question which has been reiterated a few times we actually you're gonna have to ask you to mute. There you go. So Jonas White, he asks, can you elaborate on third-party targeting options such as a header bidding system and how to enable them in AMP?
Sure. So hopefully there's not too bad of an echo. We had to change our headphone situation. So I would say so header bidding as a function is, you're taking JavaScript and you're putting in the header of a page. So the function of that and how that exists and how that works today fundamentally changes. However, what I'll say is that we've talked with a lot of the third-party partners, and we've talked with a lot of publishers where this is something that's a priority. And there is a solution that we have put out there that allows JavaScript to run and pass a value in through the iframe. And in working and speaking with many of the third parties, they seem to feel that this was a sufficient solution for that. And so what we can do is make sure that that is highlighted in some of the follow-up documentation if there's more specifics needed. But we've heard a lot of that feedback, and we're working with many of the third parties who are frankly the experts on things like header bidding to make sure that the solutions that we're putting forward for that type of function truly meet the needs of what they want to do.
So if somebody wants to work with header bidding, I guess the answer to that is yes, soon, and as things that will adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not to be, it's just not header bidding in the traditional way that header bidding is executed, but it serves a similar function. So to call it header bidding is just a little misleading, but to a similar function to what header bidding provides, meaning passing a value in before the core sort of ad decisions are made, that functionality, there is an opportunity for that. It doesn't come without risks, right? And which is a lot of what publishers are dealing with today, risks of whether it be latency and or decreased viewability depending on the on what needs to be measured and what the goals are of the campaigns.
That's great. We got another question from Hussein Moshnali. Hussein's been with us for a few different office hours, so hey, welcome back, and thank you for your questions as always. He's asking, will AdSense propose special ads for AMP, or can we use responsive design ads or standard format?
You could use the responsive design ads. There is an AdSense plugin, I believe, or an option for that is contained within the help documents. That gives you the information on AdSense. But all of the AdSense units that you would use today could be implemented and work the same way.
That's great. And we have another question which I don't know that we can necessarily answer, but Hussein Rahim asks, what kind of traffic volume does AMP expect to drive, and what percentage of publishers' mobile traffic will be from AMP pages?
Yeah, to your point, that's not something we know, or I frankly know at this point right now. So I don't have an answer for that.
I guess have a great.
Oh, go ahead, Stacey.
I was going to say we do have a great hangout from Rudy Galfi about analytics specifically. So Rudy does touch on that. We have a host of analytics providers who are committed to showing you specifically the traffic coming from AMP. So that is something publishers can monitor individually.
Yeah, and what I was going to say there is that's probably more of a bench test situation where, if you have your specs for your site currently and what kind of traffic you're getting from your current pages, and then once you adopt AMP, you can actually compare that and get some true values for, what kind of traffic you have going on. Here we got another question from Vish. He says, or she, what do you mean What do you mean you will continue to integrate different platforms? Please expand on this point.
Meaning if there are third-party technology companies that are currently not, involved or reviewing the AMP project, we will continue to be open to working with them. For example, launching globally, there's technology companies in a lot of different regions that Google doesn't have a relationship with, and we want to make sure that we remain open to integrating them and allowing them to integrate with AMP because it is open. And so that's really the main point there, is that we're not opposed to working with the technology ecosystem and many of those third parties going forward.
That's great. And we got a real basic question here from Jafar Zadi, which will actually lead us up pretty well for a few other questions coming up. Jafar says, what is DFP?
So DFP is DoubleClick for publishers, and so that is the core ad serving platform that DoubleClick had built prior to being acquired by Google, and then we relaunched a few years ago, and is used by a lot of different publishers globally.
That's great. And Amy Cerrito asks, will DFP be providing templates specifically for AMP Creative?
Not necessarily, because most of the creatives that are going to be used and the sizes that are going to be used are already DFP supported sizes and units. In terms of templates, we're trying to be more flexible than to provide very specific templating requirements. And so I would say if there's a question around if a certain unit or size is supported and you use DFP, is that you can reach out to your technical account team for DFP, and they can help sort of understand what the requirements would be. But I don't necessarily see, I don't know, Benzie, I don't know if you have a different opinion here, but I don't see any need or requirement to have those templates available. I will say there's been a lot of requests for, as the ad industry evolves and as innovation is driven on the using amps as ads, that some have said, hey, if I'm a content creator, if I'm an ad creator, I want to find templates that'll conform and work within AMP on the advertising and buy side. But again, we haven't dug too deep into that, and it's very early days on even thinking through what some of those might look like.
Brian Ibach asks, AdSense is listed as a supported ad network. Does the implementation change if AdSense is served through DFP?
No, that would if AdSense served through DFP into AMP is the same as AdSense served into DFP today through non-AMP.
All right, so we have a few more. Those are pretty much the rest of our small, short ones. Oh, we got one more from Amy Cerrito. She says, are you working with the IAB to establish standards for creatives?
So we are speaking with the IAB. I mean, there's a couple different things that are going on with the IAB. There's a lot with the IAB around ad blocking that we're partnering with them and working with them on. And we've started to talk to them specifically about AMP and making sure that they're aware of what it is and how it aligns with a lot of things and goals that they've stated for that. And so I would say it's not directly related to that work. But I would say yes, they're aware, and yes, we are speaking with them around what AMP is, and also educating, using them as a platform to help speak and educate the market around not only AMP but just the value of having faster mobile experiences.
And we got Jack Downey back again. Jack, thank you again for all your questions over the last several Hangouts. We appreciate that. Jack is asking, is there a published expectation around performance similar to the OpenRTB expectation? If not, do you have an idea of what kind of performance limitations you might apply so that we can target our SLA accordingly?
I can do that.
Okay, sure.
So yeah, there's no performance SLAs per se, since the ad is independently running off the rest of the content and the page. So not necessarily. Answer's no.
All right. And we got another question from Jack. He says, once we have submitted our ad tag code to the GitHub repo, it has been approved and our tags are live on publisher pages. Will we have access to performance data, in other words, load times and and Phil, based on our volume and or in comparison to other ad networks?
So I think the question is, are we going to share sort of like benchmarking of performance against other third-party advertising tech companies and whatnot? I would say the answer right now would be no. I think you can get your own analytics, right, based on how you're doing your own measurement and targeting. I think it's an interesting idea to be able to make sure that you sort of know where you stand and you can benchmark yourself against the other third parties. And so, I mean, I would say the answer right now is no, but I think it's an interesting idea, and we'd sort of love to hear how people would feel and think about something like that.
All right, we got another one from Jack. He says, what are the ramifications for sending some non-SSL compliant creatives? Is it simply that the ads will be ignored, or would there be punitive long-term punishments for an exchange due to having sent non-SSL creatives? In other words, some sort of blacklisting.
There's two questions in there. The first one is what happens when non-SSL creatives get served? They basically end up being blanks. The second question is, will we keep a record of that? No, not at this point. That's the current status.
All right. Let's see here. We got one from Wes Tomlinson. Wes asks, could you go over the limitations for user-initiated iframe resizing and briefly explain how such an event would render on the page?
So Stacy actually just posted a bunch of comments which has resources into what exactly it is. To directly answer your question, there's no right sort of deterministic way of knowing. It depends on a lot of things like where the user scroll position is and where the actual ad is, if it's in the top of the page, below the fold, etc. So all the documentation is in GitHub, and it's in one of the links that Stacy just posted. Please check it out.
That's great. Vish asks, will ad blockers be allowed to block ads on Google AMP?
Yeah, so ad blocking doesn't change just because of AMP. There's no there's no sort of change in the function and the way that ad blockers would work in that environment.
Monica Stroud asks, is there a plan to expand the AMP ad specifications to support passing of variables to the ad servers? In other words, unique user LD, user session value, AB bucket names to track viewability, ads, and bucket. Oh, we got you muted.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
So yeah, you can do that today right now, actually. Also in the documentation that was just posted in the comments section, we do have a way of using remotes.html file to essentially run custom JavaScript, which you could use to populate your ad tag and send a call to the ad server. So please check out the documentation called remote.html.
That's great. Mark Meyer asks, he says, will the viewability measurements in AMP go for MRC certification? This is very important for many advertisers.
So AMP as the, I think the question is AMP as the browser going for MRC certification, or not browser, AMP as the project itself going for MRC certification? I would say my understanding is the technologies that are providing the viewability metrics are the ones that need to be MRC certified, and all of that still applies within AMP for Moat or ActiveView or others that are measuring the viewability within those environments.
Great. Vish is asking, when will Google start serving AMP pages in search results?
So I would say we're days away from launching, and if there's more specific questions on that, I can sort of direct you to a contact. I can give you more information.
Great. Michael Bindall says he's having some issues with constant echo. If anybody else on the call or watching the call is still having issues with echo, just do me a favor, give me some comments in the Q&A app here so we can address that. But I think we got our echo situation resolved, hopefully. Let's see. Jasanat Singh asked a similar question to what we were asking about before. He says, how will AMP support header bidding or running third-party JavaScript in the head? We addressed that a few minutes ago, and there will be additional information on that in the documentation as well. Let's get into some more technical stuff. Let's see. Okay, here's one from SEO Wiz, and I believe SEO Wiz was with us on a few other calls previously, so thanks for coming back. Regarding the AMP pages, the Search Console is reporting that it cannot find AMP pages on the site whereas those have been implemented and working fine when validating and also when checking an AMP demo. Any specific reason for not being shown in the console? We, I believe, last session actually addressed a few of these questions. So SEO Wiz, definitely check out our last office hour where I think we addressed those in detail. And then are there additional links, Stacy, that we can kind of direct them to if they have additional questions around that?
Yeah, specifically about Search Console, I can include that we have great Help Center documentation specifically about how to check validation of your AMP files.
Great. Another one from SEO Wiz, and again, I think this one was also addressed in the last session. He says, I wanted to know about proper implementation of rel equals AMP HTML tag. If the site has separate desktop and mobile versions, the tag has to be implemented on both the versions or only the desktop versions. Yes, we definitely did address this one in the last Hangout. So SEO Wiz, definitely check that one out, and there's additional information in the help documentation for this one. Mark Browner, sorry, Mark, if I'm butchering your last name. Could you confirm if a 302 redirect passes link juice and PageRank? Recently, you've been reading a lot of articles stating that Google confirms that this is the case. Could you confirm if a 302 redirect is treated as the same as a 301 redirect after some time?
So, I mean, I'm not sure that that is necessarily related to AMP, more so on the search and renderings. I don't. Do you have an
Yeah, I think
to
it's
that?
more related to the search side, not necessarily anything to do with AMP.
Cool. So,
Yeah, you should definitely reach out to the Stack Overflow community for that.
Stack Overflow community. All right. Let's see. I'm definitely not going to pronounce this one right. Saraz Joshi. Hopefully that's correct. How many div tags can I use? I try to use minimum, as some told me that I have to have clean code. Is that the right strategy?
There's no limitation of the number of div tags per se, because you can't necessarily use div tags. Within AMP has its own sort of structure. So yeah, you don't necessarily use div tags in that sense.
Great. Corey Burns asks, will the iframe within which add code is inserted be locked, or will we have the ability to dynamically insert code into the page outside of the iframe?
Yeah, Vamsi can elaborate, but there will be some ability to implement outside of the iframe. You know, the specifics of that, and that's I guess it gets back to a little bit of the header bidding question. There is some ability to run that third-party JavaScript and you know pass it through the iframe. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
It's absolutely it's in the documentation which says remote.html. It's the same for AMP ads and iframes.
Great, and this I think might be a similar question. Brian Ibach asks, currently the ad slot creative size is defined by the width and height attribute of the AMP element. Because of this, it's not entirely clear if we are able to include multiple ad sizes within the same slot. Is this possible?
Not today. Right now, because the page needs to know the size of the ad, there's only one size that you can provide. But we are considering it in the future. And if you have some great ideas, please open up a GitHub issue, and we'll discuss that.
That's great. That's great. This might also be a related. Actually, I feel like I could get you guys a mute there. Christian Oliveira. Christian, first of all, thank you for coming back on Friday. I know you had a lot of questions on Thursday, and we're excited for this hangout. So thanks for joining us again. He asks, would you consider having more flexibility with dynamic sizing of the ads? It really limits us in the fact that we have to define a strict size while we have campaigns with different but similar sizes. And he lists some examples like 320 by 50, 320 by 53, or 300 by 300 versus 300 by 250.
Yeah. I would say we're right now doing in launching with the fixed sizes was more so out of you know, making sure some of that core functionality worked really smoothly and elegantly. We would certainly be open to discussing and understanding, you know, exactly those examples and how we can make sure that we accommodate those. And so depending on, you know, how and what platforms from an ad perspective that are being used, we can, you know, we'd love to hear the feedback and, you know, try to make sure that it can work within those criteria longer term.
Also check out
sorry.
Also check out the resizing feature that we have available today, which allows the creator to kind of resize, of course, with strict limitations, not destroying the UX essentially.
Very good. Monica Stroud asks, will safe frame creatives be supported in AMP?
Yes.
Yes.
Chris Andrews asks, so will AdSense be served within iframes and AMP, and if so, still be able to target topics to text? So will it use the regular HTML pages to target content?
I'm guessing this question is from a programmatic standpoint, to know if you're able to target ads based on the content of the page. If that is the case, in some sense, yes. I think it depends on the capability of the ad server, and it's not necessarily something that AMP inherently provides. So check with the ad server, and they'll have more answers for you.
All right. Let's see here. Here's another one from Brian Eibach. He says, on load, we are initializing multiple ads. However, we noticed that the correlator value is the same for each unit. Is there any way to have the correlator value dynamically adjust to prevent caching?
Yeah, so I don't think your impressions are duplicated because the correlator value is the same. They are actually mutually different, exclusive, I guess. So the correlator value can still be the same, but an impression can be counted for that. And we keep the correlator value same, so the server kind of knows that the page request is coming from the same page.
All right. Here's one from Chris Andrews. Welcome back, Chris. Ad rotation. He says, I have several ads in the code of my cached pages. I trigger which one to display through a dynamically created CSS file. Since AMP doesn't support external CSS files and pages are cached, what suggestions do you have for rotating ads?
So rotating ads into the same spot is what I'm assuming? Right?
Yeah. And typically, I mean, I'm wondering why you would do that, because ad servers allow you to do that with that exclusive feature of being able to rotate into different sections. Kind of a non-standard use case, but please reach out to us at AMP-HTML, Stack Overflow, and we can take it there.
That's great. All right, here's a couple quick ones here, and then we got one longer one. Vishal says, in Q2, Q3, we said support more platforms. Please advise which platform. So we were talking earlier about like third-party platforms. Do we have like a kind of a comprehensive list of who those are at this point?
I would not necessarily. Like, some of the timing of the support of those platforms is not necessarily up to the AMP project, right? You know, we engage, we provide the information and documentation, but many of them have to do what work that they need to do on their own side. So we don't really have the exact list for Q2, Q3. I think the main point there was on engagement and making sure that that folks knew we were open to adding platforms into that. We can review and see how comfortable other platforms are with the communication of where they are in the cycle of development. I think the encouragement is, if you're a publisher and you have a third-party platform that you want to make sure is functioning within AMP, is that you reach out to that platform directly. We're happy to sort of again engage with them in GitHub, but also answer any questions that they may have otherwise. But again, it's not completely up to the AMP project and the people working on it to sort of stage out and determine when someone is ready or how quickly they develop, because everybody's development cycles are different. And so we want to make sure that we continue to be open to the partnerships of those platforms.
That's great. So we have two somewhat complicated, at least in my view. It goes just outside my level of understanding here. Mark Browner asks, he says, is the free-flang markup invalid when referencing AJAX URLs everywhere in the XML sitemap hreflang? Reflang? I don't know how you say that. But pointing the canonical tags of those AJAX URLs to the non-AJAX part of the URL.
It's definitely not related to ads, but I think Rudy Galfi goes into in his session, so I would urge you to check out that AMP session.
Great, and if we have additional questions around that, definitely add those in the comment section, and we'll re-reference that. Mark, you've got a couple questions related specifically to that, so I'd definitely recommend checking out Rudy's Hangout. I think it was like 3 Hangouts ago. And we'll be able to get back to that. Hussein Mashinali has another question about AMP and Search Console. I think this might be something we answered in the last session, but let's just see if we can direct him in the right direction here. About AMP and Search Console Search, we can see the number of indexed pages, but we can't see the details of the pages. Will Console Search provide details so we can test if they show an AMP demo? And he says, actually, we don't see any AMP pages in the demo while we have, and then his comment cut off.
So the demo is just that, Hussein. I would say, you know, we're very, very close to launch, and then you can start seeing how your AMP files are validating and indexing. But again, I can provide specific documentation for how to get that information from Search Console.
Great. Fayez Rather has a question which I'm pretty sure is not related to AMP. He says, how can I get my web images to be shown in Google Images? I believe that is off topic. However, if you do have questions about that, Fayez Rather, feel free to shoot us an email at newslabsupport@google.com, and we can try to get you pointed in the right direction. There's plenty of tutorials around that. Vish, kind of an open-ended question. Please share any scenario where Google AMP Ads is not yet mature.
I would say there's room to mature on the format side and on the format innovation side. I think a lot of what we were talking about from early on with what types of ad units are and aren't allowed, you know, things like adhesion units had come up quite a bit, and I think that those are units that are guaranteed viewable in a lot of instances. However, depending on the implementation of them and depending on the technology that's used to put them on the page, some of them are more disruptive than others. And so, I think I think we need to mature a little bit more on the format side, and I think you should expect to see that quickly evolve over the next month or two, so that we can start to allow more and more. And I would say overall, all of the technology companies, DoubleClick included, on the Google side, needs to work on making sure that the delivery and the speed of the rendering of advertising improves. And it's already improved, actually, since a lot, over the last like 60 days, I would say even. But I would say that is another area where that's more on, not necessarily on the AMP as a spec side, but more of on the technology side. But I think formats is probably one that we need to continue to push on and innovate on and mature.
That's great, and that's all the questions that we actually have lined up for now. Stacy, do you have any additional news or information you'd like to add into here before we'll maybe pad a little bit of time until we get some additional questions?
No, just want to point to the resources that we have posted on the G+ event. I know many of you are watching in the live stream, so you won't see the information there. But if you go back to the G+ page, in the most recent comment, we have a slew of resources, thanks to Vamsi, that really go deep and comprehensive into some of the questions that you guys have. And we really do appreciate all the questions about Search Console. We really want that to be the place where you can see if your AMP files are validating and indexing. So we're actually talking to that team to see if we can get a product manager to potentially host a Hangout on Air once AMP launches, so you can start seeing kind of AMP out in the open in the industry and how your files are performing.
Definitely, and we're going to additionally have training material and possibly lessons on the g.co/newslab site after the AMP launch. So definitely keep sending us in your questions. We're going to do our best to answer these during the office hours or point you into the right directions like Stack Overflow or other resources which are available. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, we're going to be doing international office hours as well. So if English is not your first language, if you have additional questions that you'd like to revisit, definitely stay tuned on our Google Plus page and our Twitter account for more information on that. I would just like to thank again Craig and our guests for joining us today and helping to answer all of these questions. And for those of you who are on the call today, a reminder, on Friday we're going to be doing our last English language AMP office hour of this series. We're going to be bringing back, who's coming back? Rudy Galfi will be back with us for format innovation. So definitely check that out. Same time, same place. No technical issues at all on that one. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Or
Nick, did you get a chance to see the questions on the Google Plus event? There are a few, and I don't know if we hit all of them, or if you were just watching the.
There's a few duplicates there, and we were able to cover most of those off, so we should be in good shape on that. Let me just make another quick swing through, make sure I didn't forget anybody. Yeah, we got Brian's question there, Christian. Yep, those are all answered.
Great.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining. Follow us on our social media accounts. You can find all of that information on g.co/newslab. Again, all of the links to the documentation and the resources that we mentioned in this call will be in the comment section on the bottom of this event page. And then you can check us out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Google News Lab, for all of the previous events that we had. Stay in touch, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and Nick, I just wanted to thank Craig and Vamsi for joining. I mean, this is such an important part of AMP, and I think this is what definitely distinguishes it from anything else out there, because they were working so hard to partner with every single provider that was interested. And as Craig highlighted, this is just the beginning. AMP hasn't launched, but we're so excited to see the collaboration throughout the industry. Formats are flexible. If you have ideas or suggestions, that is what GitHub is for. We promise that everyone on our team is monitoring that on the hour, looking for great ideas and suggestions to make this work. So thanks again to Craig, Vamsi, and the rest of the team, and onward towards launch.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vamsi.
Thanks, Vamsi. Craig.
Have a good afternoon. Have a good weekend.